Weston, listen, I hope I got you out of bed. There's a friend of here who wants to talk to you. Just a minute, hold on.
You know what time in the morning this is?
Herb, this is Don. Don Nichols from the club. Well, there's been some trouble. Yeah, a friend of mine, Allison Conway, killed her husband. But she didn't know it was him. She thought it was an intruder. It's an open and shut case of accidental homicide, or whatever you call it. But I wanted to have the best attorney we can get.
Thank you. I believe Mrs. Conway is going to need an attorney. Not a mark, huh? Oh, wide awake, Counselor? Looks like we've got a goodie for you.
What have you found out?
So far, that nobody broke into the house.
I thought there'd been an intruder. There was.
Oh, he's only repeating what Mrs. Conway already told us. Nothing was stolen. None of the doors or windows were forced.
What are you talking about, Lieutenant? What about that open window? Allison and the housekeeper both swore that they were positive that window was closed before they went to bed.
What about it? Nobody could have gotten up there without a ladder. Besides, there'd be marks on the wall. There are no marks.
Well, maybe he got in another way and jumped from there.
That's a long way down. I doubt if he could jump without hurting himself on these paving blocks. Besides, somebody in the house would have heard him. The point is, if there was an intruder, how did he get inside?
I don't know. But what about that broken vase? Doesn't that prove something?
Yes, it proves that somebody broke a vase.
What did Mrs. Conway and the housekeeper have to say?
Mrs. Conway was pretty incoherent at the time. She didn't see an intruder. But I did get some information from the housekeeper.
I'd like to talk to her.
Good. Oh, Mr. Nichols, would you mind waiting outside here, please?
Okay. Well, thanks, Bernice.
Oh, Bernice. Mrs. Conway was on the stairway when you went into the entry hall, right?
She was up there.
I see. How long have you worked for Mrs. Conway?
Oh, a long time, but that doesn't mean I'm lying about it.
I understand, Bernice. Well, what did you do after you went into the hall?
Well, I looked around a little, and then I checked to make sure the front door was locked.
Was it?
Oh, yes. I went to bed, and then I heard some shooting.
You heard the shooting, got out of bed, and then came out into the hall, didn't you? Then what happened?
Then I heard Mr. Conway scream, "Allison, don't. It's me, Tony, don't."
And after he screamed, you heard another shot, didn't you? Right?
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you, Bernice.
I'd like to talk to Mrs. Conway.
All right, Herb, downtown. I'll get her. Medical examiner said he was killed instantly. There wasn't time for him to call out.
Mrs. Conway, you didn't know your husband was coming over last night?
No, he hasn't been near the house since we've been separated. He knew I didn't want to see him.
I understand you're demanding a large divorce settlement.
That's right, Lieutenant. I was one of Tony's toys. It took him exactly 2 months to get tired of me. But I stuck with him for 5 years trying to make the marriage work. He embarrassed me in front of his friends. He destroyed my career, and then he wanted to throw me away. I know, I felt I deserved better than that.
Wouldn't you say, that is, Tony's widow, you stood to gain a lot more than as his divorced wife?
If you're saying I deliberately killed him, that's a lie. I thought Tony was the intruder. I did.
There was no intruder. You're under arrest, Mrs. Conway. Suspicion of murder. Follow.
first-degree murders stick?
Don't have a bet on that, Herb. We found Tony's early evening companion, and maybe she can shed some light on this situation. You're welcome to come along.
She hated Tony. I'm quite certain she deliberately killed him.
Isn't that an emotional accusation, Miss Reed? Weren't you engaged to Tony when he met Allison?
Well, yes. Tony always had a weakness for showgirls. I knew it wouldn't last. I was willing to wait. Tony admitted that it was a terrible mistake. He asked me to marry him as soon as he obtained his divorce.
Getting back to last night, you and Tony had dinner at the club?
He said he had to leave by 11:30 to stop by the house and that I should wait for him.
Why did he go at that hour?
To make certain Ellison would be asleep. Tony didn't relish the idea of any further scenes with her.
Did he tell you why he was going?
No. Only that he had a surprise in store for Ellison. Something that would prevent her from getting any of his money.
In other words, Miss Reed, Tony's visit to the house at midnight was completely furtive and secretive as far as Allison was concerned.
Oh, not necessarily. You see, the housekeeper knew he was coming. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a luncheon date.
Just a moment, Miss Reed. You said Bernice knew that Tony was coming to the house?
Well, yes. He telephoned first to make sure Ellison would be asleep. She probably told Ellison. They're very close, you know.
No.
You told her that Tony was coming, didn't you?
No, I didn't. I didn't want to upset her. I never said a word.
You told her, and she decided to make it look as if an intruder had broken in. So she would have a good excuse for shooting Tony.
No, she didn't know he was coming.
You've got to tell the truth, Bernice.
I am, Mr. Maris. I am. I swear it.
I did some checking, Bernice. And I found out that you were Mrs. Allison's wardrobe mistress when she was in show business. So when she got married, she brought you here. She's been very good to you, hasn't she?
She's a fine person, but I'm not protecting her.
You aren't? You don't realize what a jam you're in, Bernice. An accessory to murder. You're in this as deep as Mrs. Conway. Here, get your coat. You're going downtown. Why don't you drop this angle on the case? You know it's beginning to smell like old fish.
I can't. It's the only angle I've got. There must be something we're both missing. Maybe the stress and excitement of the moment will bring it out. That's why, with your permission, I'd like to go up the house and restage the entire incident.
All right, Counselor. Be my guest.
Thanks. Incidentally, I'll need Mrs. Conway and Bernice.
Oh, wait a minute. You can't do that. You can't get them released for a thing like this. They're both under arrest.
No, but you can. I know how you always like your facts to be exact, Lieutenant. Did you restage the shooting before booking your suspects?
Of course not. It wasn't necessary.
You sure?
Charlie? Yeah, listen, will you release Mrs. Conway and her housekeeper in my custody for a couple of hours?
Well, not now.
Hold on. Why not?
Well, I'd like to duplicate the original conditions as much as possible. Let's make it after dark.
Charlie, make it after dark, huh?
Thanks, John.
See you after dark, huh?
Bernice, what was that noise?
Oh, it was a bass on the desk.
Is the door locked?
Yes, ma'am. Strange, I wonder what made it fall. Shall I sweep up the pieces?
No, never mind. Good night.
Good night.
It's loaded, isn't it?
Yes, with blanks. There's nothing to worry about.
No. Please, I
Mrs. Conway, Mr. Maris is having this done to help you. Now, you just do exactly what you did that night. Mrs. Conway, you should have waited before firing the second shot. You didn't give him a chance to call out.
No, I can't. Please, please don't make me do it again. I can't.
All right. Paula, take it downstairs. Jerry, turn on the lights.
I'm sorry, Allison. Shouldn't have done it. I didn't realize the effect it would have on her.
You meant well, Herb. We might as well take him back now.
That's the way it happened, Mr. Maris. Exactly the way.
What?
Well, that's what I heard first. 2 shots, just like now.
Well, you couldn't have. There wasn't a chance for him to call out.
Oh, yes, that's it. First there were 2 shots, then Mr. Conway called out, and then there was another shot.
Oh, you've got to be wrong, Bernice. There were only 2 shots fired from Mrs. Conway's gun.
No, I don't care. I know what I heard. First there were those 2 shots, one right after the other. Then Mr. Conway called out, and then there was a 3rd shot.
John, outside the bullet you found on the wall, how carefully did you check for any others?
Well, we didn't. There was no reason to.
There is now.
I better have another talk with those boys at the lab. Well, Herb, I hate to admit it, but I guess you're right. The lab boys must have missed that hole in the drape.
Now we have to find out if it came from Allison's gun.
Thanks for waiting, Charles. The good news?
Great. According to ballistics, that 3rd bullet throws my whole case right into the ash can and matches the same with the one we pulled out of the wall, and both were fired from Allison's gun. But that 3rd bullet was from the same caliber revolver. That's all we've got.
Then she didn't kill him.
Not even accidentally.
But what do you think of the intruder theory now?
Well, it would mean that the intruder killed Tony, but why? Allison was the one with the gun. Now, Herb, why look for a phantom when we already have some good suspects? Like Bernice, for instance. She's very devoted to Allison. And she knew Tony was coming over and maybe even knew why. And then there's Allison's boyfriend.
Don Nichols?
Yes. Why not? He's going to marry her, isn't he? Herb, how well do you know him?
Only from the club. I've played tennis with him a lot. He seems like a pretty nice guy.
He's also pretty broke. He stood to indirectly gain a lot more financially by making Allison a widow instead of a divorcee.
Well, true, but he didn't know that Tony was coming back to the house that night. Now, here's a suspect for you. The Reed girl. Was Tony really going to marry her after his divorce?
I told you he was. It wasn't any secret. Our whole crowd knew it. Okay, Shirley.
Miss Reed. What was the fight about on the night he was murdered?
Fight? I don't know what you're talking about.
I think hard, Miss Reed. We already have one version. You were overheard.
Who from? Don Nichols? Who'd believe him? He's trying to save Allison from the gallows. Some people will do anything for money.
It wasn't Don. As a matter of fact, we got it from some of the waiters.
I don't know what they told you, but it wasn't a fight at all. Tony and I just had a little discussion.
What about?
Well, to be perfectly candid, Lieutenant, I was jealous about his returning to the house.
Jealous, but you just told us that Tony was in love with you.
There was something about the way he acted that night. I don't know quite how to express it, but something excited and secretive in his manner. It upset me.
So you followed him.
As I said, I was upset. I didn't like the idea.
You're under arrest. Get your head. Art. Take him out to the car. Ah, nice work. But tell me, when did Patrice tell you she saw someone jump out of that window?
She didn't. It's a case of faith paying off, John. I believe there was an intruder. And how else could he have left the house?
It's still hard to believe that Don would do a thing like that.
Yeah. You know, what I don't understand is how he could jump out of that window without hurting himself.
Apparently it takes personal experience to convince some people. I'll just have to show him.